Show don't tell is pivotal in order to create unforgettable villains. It allows the villains to be villainous while still letting the players make their own opinions about them. The Dark Knight trilogy would not have reached its success without villains like Ra's al Ghul, Scarecrow, Bane, or the Joker. Today, we're going to dive into the first part of our mini-series of Show Don't Tell with villains. Many people might think that Show Don't Tell with villains just means you have the villain kill someone. Luckily, there's so much more to it than that. Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM. This is the show designed to make you the world's best dungeon master without forcing you to spend your life, all of your money, or all of your relationships on becoming the best dungeon master. I'm your host today, Justin Lewis. I've been diving into these topics for the last 3 years to figure out what really works and what's going to make the best game possible so that way you can shorten your learning curve and become the world's best dungeon master. There's 4 parts to dungeon mastering. There's people management, performance, game design, and storytelling. That's it. Today, we are going to be talking about storytelling, specifically about show, don't tell. A very common saying among storytellers is show, don't tell. And the ironic thing is that usually when people tell you to do this, they don't really tell you how to do this. They don't show you how to do show, don't tell. Today, we're going to fix that. This marks the first episode of a mini-series all about show, don't tell. Today, we're going to talk about villains, but in the future, we're going to talk about settlements, magic items, combat, and more. By the end of each episode, you should be able to confidently say, I know how to show and not tell about any of these given topics. Before we do jump into the rest of the show, I do want to highlight one of our awesome Discord members. Our community is really what keeps us going. You guys provide the outlet for us to make content and let people watch it and get gratified by people watching our stuff, right? Like we wouldn't do this if people weren't watching. So the fact that you guys pay attention and are members of our Discord, we wanted to do a special shout out of some of the people in our Discord. So today we are talking about R Release the Kraken. I hope I'm saying that right. There's 2 R's at the beginning, but it's Release the Kraken. His name is Jackson. For fun outside of D&D, he primarily reads fiction, mostly fantasy and Star Wars. Holla! He plays video games, he watches anime, and he tries to do these things with his wife when he can. He plays Baldur's Gate 3, The Witcher 3, and Nier Automata, which I never heard, and those are actually some of his favorite games of all times. His favorite book series is The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, and also the Darth Bane trilogy by Drew Karpatian. And I believe I've read the first one of that, and Darth Bane is one of the coolest characters in Star Wars lore. Disney, please don't ever touch Darth Bane because I know you will ruin him. I know that's going to be a little bit of a hot take for some of you out there, but Disney, stay away. Anyways, so Jackson, again, he also likes Plagueis as a book, as an honorable mention, and Skeleton Knight in Another World, which is a particular manga. And he's been starting to get into some light novels and mangas, which he says has been pretty fun. Some things that not many people know about him is that he's actually really good at pool, billiards. And role-playing social interactions is his favorite part of D&D, both as a player and as a DM, though on the DM side, writing lore and background narrative is also tied for that number 1 position of his favorite things to do, or his favorite parts of Dungeons & Dragons. So just want to say thank you, Release the Kraken, for being a part of our community and making it that much special and more unique, and just helping us lay that amazing foundation for an awesome community. So thank you, Release the Kraken. Now, show don't tell is allowing your players to think because you aren't telling them how to think or what to think about. Remember when you were growing up and you were a toddler and people would tell you what to do? Do you remember how that felt? No one likes that feeling. Nobody likes being told how to think or what to think. Instead, when something happens, we like to form our own opinions. It's because at an intrinsic level, that's what learning is. And our brains are hardwired to love learning. When you learn something, your brain releases dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that signals reward. When you learn, your brain literally rewards you for learning. Show Don't Tell is a storytelling technique that facilitates this internal learning mechanism and allows the audience to experience dopamine releases as the story progresses. They are learning the story and being neurologically rewarded as a result. Explaining it in a more concrete way, simply describe everything that is perceivable and concrete. And that's what you do. You don't need to describe what is inconcrete or imperceptible. And in a game that relies heavily on a mechanic called perception, this can get pretty confusing pretty fast. So let me explain it on one more level. You as the dungeon master are the 5 senses of your players. They will not taste, touch, hear, smell, or see anything that isn't filtered through you first. Because of this, your players rely on you to tell them about the world they are playing in. You can't tell them everything because not everything is important, right? No one needs to know the exact angle that the wall meets the floor. That's just too much information and it's not relevant. So instead, you rely on telling them what is valuable for them to know. In this case, valuable means enhancing the gameplay, whether through allowing the player to move through the story or simply flavoring the world. While being their 5 senses, it can be incredibly tempting to do some of the thinking for them. But as Andrew Stanton of Pixar described in his TED Talk, you don't want to do the work for the audience. Let them do the thinking. So, to keep it simple, describe what is perceptible and don't do the work for them. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to do this with villains. And after the episode, in the Patreon-only content of today's show, I'll also work through some of the villains that I've used in my campaigns and ways that I could have done them a little bit better and some ways that I actually did pretty good. Dungeon masters need to engage the emotional centers of their players to keep them coming back. Our world is full of other options, and in order to keep your players engaged, they need emotional ties to what is going on. That's how you get players to sit still while other players are doing long combat turns. That's how you get players to enjoy the lore of your game. That's how you develop players into strong role players with good sportsmanship. You engage their emotional center. Villains are the contrast, the conflict of the story. In our last podcast, Jay Foster said that villains are the theme. They are such an impactful part of the story that they have to leave an impression. Otherwise, the entire story falls flat. Writing a villain is very difficult. Even if you get a good villain right, though, you can ruin them by not showing and instead telling the audience all about your villain. Add to that the simple fact that when a BBEG comes out, finally, in many campaigns, the players won't take them seriously. Instead, they'll talk to them as if they're just an ordinary baddie. They'll badmouth them, they'll talk back to them, and they won't take them as a serious threat. Nod your head if this has happened to you, and I can see a lot of you nodding out there in my mind. The problem is, your players aren't emotionally invested. They don't see the big bad as a real threat. Showing and not telling with your villains lets each player experience the villain differently. They can feel different emotions, face different threats, and essentially play different storylines. And in each of those stories, each player gets to be the hero. When you do this, they'll be emotionally invested. They will be immersed. And the villain will be a villain. A really good example of this, just to start off with, is from the campaign Out of the Abyss. And if any of my current campaign players are listening to this right now, you better stop listening. But when you witness Demogorgon rise from an underground lake and destroy an entire settlement right in front of your eyes, and you can't do anything to stop him, that's pretty good showing. And it allows the players to feel the moment. Your players need show and tell in order to have fun. They are playing for themselves, which means that they want to be the hero. And when they make the connections in their mind this villain is pretty bad, they are being the hero. They are acting as the character. By showing and not telling, you make the hero the primary actor in any given situation, even if it's in their own mind. By not showing and telling, instead, you make the primary actor you. And your players are just observers. Another way to look at it is if the player is a toddler, right? You might be feeding them green beans, but at the end of the day, your toddlers want to feed themselves. Even if they don't like green beans, they would prefer to feed themselves and do that work because it makes them feel empowered and it makes them feel like the hero. Your players don't want to be spoon-fed. They want to be the hero. This agency on their part enhances the immersion and the buy-in of the entire group. It creates a player-centered story. It builds emotional investment, and it solidifies the player being the hero. This is also really important for villains because it can save tremendous amounts of time. And this is the age of give it to me now, right? I don't have time to waste. When you show, don't tell, people can perceive things at a gut level that they might not register with their mind. They'll know intrinsically that's not safe. Even if their logical center hasn't really processed that fully. And I think sometimes that's why we have those instances of players bad-mouthing or back-talking to the villain when they're trying to do a monologue, because the players, they don't actually feel that gut feeling of a threat. Not just that, but it makes the villains more impactful and more meaningful. When people think, they are much more rewarded. I've already talked about how your brain is hardwired to reward itself for learning, even if you learn something is dangerous and bad. And the only way to do that is by showing villains and not telling about villains. Right, so I've talked ad nauseum about why you should do it. Let's get to how. How do you actually do this? First thing let me say is I'm not perfect. I'm not an expert on this. One of the reasons why I'm diving into show, don't tell is because I personally want to make it a stronger aspect of my games. I feel like it's somewhere where I could be lacking a bit. And frankly, I want to do better. I want to be better. So with that, let's go through some of the ways that you can show and not tell with your villains. And the first one is through the lines they will and won't cross. There is a difference between villains and heroes. In Infinity War, Thanos throws his favorite daughter, arguably the only person he's ever loved, off a cliff because of his goal. That is a line he is willing to cross. That is also a hallmark of his character. He consistently proves himself to be the person who is willing to make the sacrifice for the utopia that he imagines, whether that's real or not. You can see him as a villain, but that particular mindset, that line he will and won't cross, no one ever had to sit you down and say, hey, Thanos is the guy who's willing to make the sacrifices, even if those sacrifices are wrong. And I mean, he does have some bit of monologue that gets there, but what you understand is when he throws Gamora off the cliff, you know he's no hero, because heroes don't do that. There is no boundaries for his goal. Nothing is sacred enough to stop him in his inexorable march towards the Infinity Gauntlet. The Joker in the Dark Knight trilogy seemingly has no lines he will not cross. He blows up a hospital. He captures a ferry full of people, including children, and holds them hostage, planning to blow them up. He has no lines. In Spider-Man Homecoming, the Vulture has a family and cares deeply about them. He protects them, but he also makes no bones about killing Peter Parker to protect his family. He is different than Thanos. The Vulture has lines that he won't cross. And these lines show you what kind of villain you're dealing with. In Aladdin, Jafar detests the princess, maybe not necessarily physically, but he is willing to marry her in order to become the Sultan and rule the kingdom. He is willing to do that. That is a line he's willing to cross, even for himself. There's huge emotional impact here because hopefully your heroes will have lines they will not cross. And this shows the contrast between hero and villain in a very stark way. It shows you guys are heroes because you're not that. It also can humanize the villain if there are lines that they won't cross, but the heroes are. It can show who they are. It can also dehumanize them. The Joker, very different character from Jafar or from the Vulture, right? The Joker, again, seemingly no lines that he won't cross. Honestly, probably has no lines at all. Anyways, so that's number one, the lines they will and won't cross. Number two, what do the villains want? Villains don't always go directly for what they really want sometimes, but their actions show what they really want. In The Incredibles, Syndrome wants revenge against Mr. Incredible for crushing his hopes and dreams. This is shown even more specifically when Syndrome, after failing in his attempt to basically prove himself a hero, he goes after Jack Jack, Mr. Incredible's child and legacy. You see that Syndrome is going to do anything he can to make Mr. Incredible feel what Syndrome as a kid felt. To have everything from you taken away, the thing you have most dear taken away. In The Dark Knight, you learn a lot about the Joker as he sets an enormous pile of money on fire. Again, this goes back to lines, but also it shows you the Joker's not in it for money. He has this mountain of cash, literally like as tall as a, I think, story and a half of a building, that he sets on fire. He does not care about money. He doesn't want it. Instead, he wants chaos. And the emotional impact that you get from using this tactic is very strong because it can force your players to feel something about what the villain wants, whether they agree with it or not. You will have characters that will say, hey, I definitely do want order in the universe, but am I willing to sacrifice my daughter like Thanos or create the first galactic empire like Emperor Palpatine? Only your characters can decide, but that, again, prompts them to be the one thinking and making decisions and forming their own opinions, learning about the story and honestly about themselves. Number two is what they want. Number three is their flaw. In Star Wars Episode 2, Anakin, who isn't quite a villain yet, but on his way, some might arguably say, he visibly shows his flaw in a scene between himself and Padme on Tatooine, right after he kills an entire village of Tusken Raiders. An action that is very villainous, to be honest, right? That was the first time he killed younglings. He killed children. And Padme still dated him. I don't know what she saw in him, but whatever. You see his flaw right there. He is prideful and he wants what he wants and he does not want anyone to take it away from him and he wants control. You see his flaw right there. In Iron Man, there's a scene where Obadiah Stane yells, Tony built this in a cave with a box of scraps. Obviously, this shows a deep jealousy of Tony and Tony's father. Throughout the movie, Obadiah constantly is trying to remind Tony that he's their team. He was on a team with Tony's dad and that they can do anything together. Anything they put their minds to, they can do together. You see his flaw right there. He is intensely jealous of Tony and, frankly, my guess is a little bit insecure about his own usefulness in their business situation. A weak example of a flaw that doesn't actually add to the villains is in the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. This is a poor example of showing and not telling, or rather showing the wrong thing. Kylo Ren throws tantrums, right? He destroys stuff because he gets angry, which is something you don't see other villains in the saga do. And it shows you, it opens up the psyche of Kylo Ren. You understand he is just a boy. He is not a man. He's a little boy trying to run an empire. And you understand his flaw. Emotionally, this allows the players and honestly forces them to feel something about the villain. The players might feel empathetic. They might struggle with the same issue. They might feel judgmental. Again, even if they struggle with the same issue, but they've overcome it, they might say, you know what? I don't have sympathy for you because I had that same problem. But it, again, forces the players and thereby their characters to form opinions. So that was number 3, their flaw. Number 4, their capabilities. In How to Train Your Dragon 2, the protagonists don't encounter the villain for a while, but instead they do encounter the aftermath of one of his attacks. They see a very large display of destruction, and they're left wondering who could have done this. It's a very strong way to let your players know who they're dealing with. In X-Men First Class, there's a scene where Shaw finally meets these new X-Men, and we see the X-Men try to unleash all their superpowers on Shaw, but he simply bottles up all of the kinetic energy shot at him and then drops a bead of it into the mouth of Darwin, who's one of the X-Men, who then explodes. Shaw takes no damage. Darwin dies completely, explodes. It's a very obvious demonstration of power and what they can do, and this is particularly useful in helping them level set their expectations. You instruct them, guys, this is not someone to mess with. This gives the party a chance to react viscerally to those capabilities and actually internalize them and maybe take them a little bit seriously, which actually leads us to tip number 5, which is the stakes. In our campaign, the one that we've closed down, unfortunately, but the Paxton Boone, we met a character named Sheriff Don Talaab. I can't do Jake Packham's voice, but if you haven't heard it, you should go listen to it just to hear Jake talk in Sheriff Don's voice, which is magical. But our characters meet Sheriff Don, and then not 5 minutes later, they see him smash a man to pulp right in front of the man's family. This, again, sets expectations and level sets the understanding of the situation we were in. We knew, okay, we can't take this guy. He is big and scary. He's tough. In The Dark Knight Rises, in one of the earliest scenes, you see Bane acting calmly and coolly as he is captured by these law enforcement agents on this plane. And he is completely calm. And then the plane starts falling apart and he remains calm. That sets your expectations as the audience for these are the stakes. This is who we're dealing with. In the movie Mulan, which is a very underrated movie, I'm not talking about the live action garbage. I'm talking about the original animated film with, what's his name? Shoot, I forgot his name. Well, anyways, it'll come to me. He voices Mushu, very iconic. His daddy. Anyways. But in Mulan, they discover the remains of a village that was destroyed as well as an entire imperial army, right, that died because of the Huns. They haven't met the Huns yet. They haven't seen Shan Yu, but this gives them a clear vision of the stakes. And that scene is so powerful because right before they're singing this lovely song about going to war for women and being strong and buff and having scars and coming home and having a family. And then they get to the village and they see destruction. And interestingly enough, after that point in the film, there's no more musical numbers. There's no more singing. And It's a very stark reality that they are faced with. Like all other methods, this gets buy-in from your players. It also checks what the players care about, which is a very useful tool. If something is destroyed or there are high stakes but your players don't care, the stakes aren't personal enough. When your villain does something and your players react, you get a sense pretty early on for what your players and your characters care about, and those are buttons that then you can press a lot later on in the campaign. We've talked about a lot of things today, obviously, and again, this is only part 1 of our Show Don't Tell miniseries. And we might not do a part 2 if you don't think today was pretty useful. If you don't, go ahead and let us know in the comments or message us on Discord or whatever. But hopefully you did find it somewhat helpful and possibly interesting, because showing and not telling is one of the greatest ways to storytell in a way that involves the audience. They become active members of the story, even if they're listening. But in this case, our players are playing, which makes it that much more crucial to show and not tell. Allow your players to think, and as they do, they will think as their character, which naturally gets them to buy in and gets them immersed in the game, which leads to better combat, better roleplay, and overall better D&D. Thank you for listening to today's show. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, again, let us know somehow. But before we close out, another big thank you to some special people. First of all, thank you to Benj Wayland, who is our graphic designer. You're going to start seeing some of his stuff coming out more as we're going to change up our logos, change up our website, and change up basically everything about us. I'm going to have a new face. I'm joking. But if you do like our graphic design stuff, go ahead and check out Benj Wayland, or give us a message or whatever. We'll get you in contact with him if you need graphic design work. I'd also like to give a special thank you to our Discord moderators, TJ Maxx, Tech Senpai, and Juka. You guys are awesome. I don't think we tell you this enough, but you guys, just having you as part of our team has really helped me and Tanner clear up some mental focus and allow us to do other things that hopefully provide better content for the listener. So thank you. And then one final thank you to patron Foxy Beard. Foxy Beard, you pay us $1 a month, but you give us so much more than that. You give us hope. You give us dreams. You give us a reason to live. I think I've over-dramatized it enough, but you get the point. Foxy Beard, we're super grateful for you. And if you're out there listening, make yourself known so we can talk to you and meet you and get to know you in real life. But before we let you go from today's episode, I do need to give you one last challenge, so that way you can take something from today's episode and do something with it. So today's challenge is, in your next campaign, session, one-shot, whatever it is, don't describe anything about your villain except their actions, intentions, and behaviors from a show-don't-tell perspective. Let your party members fill in the blanks in terms of opinions, motivations. Let them do the thinking. Use show-don't-tell with your villains. We'll be back next time with another handcrafted episode just for you. But until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.